I'm going to cut right to the chase of this video, and that is I want to find out if the new Transition Spur is as fast or maybe even faster than my cross-country bike. Now my cross-country bike is what I would consider a traditional cross-country bike. 70-degree head angle, no dropper seat posts, about 90 millimeters of travel in the rear, a little bit more than normal in the front. It's got 120, but as far as ride quality, it is your typical lightning fast cornering, really quick accelerating cross-country bike. What I love about the Transition Spur is it is super fast feeling, but it's also extremely stable. When cornering, I feel like it just kind of flows into a turn and holds its line so well. It's not near as twitchy as a traditional cross-country bike, but how does it compare to a cross-country bike in terms of lap times? And that's what I want to do in this video. The three main qualities that I look for in an XC race bike is pedaling efficiency. It's got to pedal well. Weight, it's got to be pretty light, and I would say 25 pounds or less. And then handling, it's got to be able to get through tight corners really quickly. So what I'll be doing is heading out either tomorrow or the next day and doing 2 timed sections that take about 13 to 15 minutes to complete. Although there's no extended climbs or descents, it's rolling the entire way. There's not much flat. The course is fairly rooty, and it's typical of what we have around here for cross-country trails. To make this test fair, I've got to use the same wheels. So I'll be using a pair of Stan's Valor, which is carbon XC wheels with Maxxis Icon tires. And with that, we'll pick up this video on the trail. All right, I'm out warming up on the RKT9. I'll be starting my time trials in about 10 minutes. So I'll do the first one, I'll rest a few minutes, and then start the second one soon after. I tell you what, jumping back on this bike, the front end just feels so lively and snappy, but also twitchy. So this is kind of a big deal for me. So if I could have a bike like the Spur with a slacker head angle, more travel, that's just as fast as this bike, that'd be really cool. Rolling up to the start of TT number 1, about to enter the pain cave. Here we go. Just gotta be careful not to go out too hard in the beginning. God, this is a fast bike. All right, first time trial on the RKT is done. Whew, this bike is so light and agile, it just like disappears underneath you. The turning on this thing is just telepathic. It's a super fun bike to ride. Rolling up to time trial number 2. That hurt. A racing buddy of mine was right behind me. He caught up to me and he was on my wheel. So I don't know how fair that was. I tried to pretend like he wasn't there. It's really hard to do. That's why you have to be on the fastest bike. Whether you're racing or whether one of your buddies catches you. It's race on. Back home from my ride and time to do the wheel swap. So the time on the first lap was 14:44. The second time trial was 13:03. So I'll go over the heart rate and all that when I have the 2 bikes to compare. So before I do the wheel swap, I want to get a weight. I want to weigh both bikes. I really am curious to see how much weight I drop off of the Spur by putting the carbon race wheels on. The RKT9 with the race wheels, the Stan's Valors, comes in at 23.83. And then the Spur with the stock wheels, the DT Swiss, and the stock tires. I don't know if these tires are heavier than the other ones. I think they are a little bit heavier than the Maxxis Icons. So this comes in at 26.1. So let's do the wheel swap and see how much weight we can drop off of the Spur. So with the Stans Valors on the Transition Spur, and by the way, I did not have to adjust the rear derailleur or the brake calipers, so I was pretty stoked about that. I just threw these on and it's good to go. So we dropped almost 1.2 pounds off this bike with those wheels, a little bit more than I thought. So I am actually really stoked about that. So this bike is about a pound heavier now than the RKT9, but it has a dropper post, and I'm just going to guess off the top of my head, that's at least half a pound compared to the carbon seat post that comes on the RKT9. So we are getting this bike down almost to the same weight. So I mentioned the three main things I look for in a cross-country bike, which is weight, pedaling efficiency, and handling. So weight, I think it's pretty close. Like half a pound really is not that big of a deal. So the big question for me is, well, pedaling efficiency, I feel like the bikes are going to be pretty similar. The big question for me is, will this bike be slower because it's not quite as agile in the corners, or will it be faster because I feel like I can go into the corners more confidently and maybe hit the downhills a little bit harder, especially those off-camber route sections. So I will say that on the RKT9 today, when I was doing my time trial, there were two sections where I almost dumped the front end. One was on a sandy section where I came around a corner and hit some sand and the front wheel almost went out. And then there was another section where it was either a root or a stick on the trail and the front end almost skipped out. And that's where the steeper, less forgiving geometry that's on a traditional cross-country bike can be a little sketchy. So when things are going well, the steep head angle is really nice to just get it around the corners. But it's when things aren't going well, when the front end skips out on something, the bike goes sideways. I found with slacker head angles, it's much easier to bring the bike back into correction. And I've been riding trail bikes for the last 3 or 4 months, and you really get used to that slack handling, slack head angle. I'll pick it back up on the trail tomorrow. All right, Pain Cave, day 2 on the Transition Spur. Here we go. Time trial number 2. Here we go. It's 2 days later since I did the time trial on the Spur, and I want to go over the results. But before I do, there's a couple things that I want to mention. First of all, I did not activate the dropper seat post when riding the Spur because I don't have one on the RKT9, even though I could put one on there. It has a port for it. I just don't have one. And I did not want that to skew the results in any way. Also, in case you're curious, I ran the Spur at 25% sag. Since it's a brand new bike, I called Transition to get their recommendation for sag for cross-country hammer mode is what I asked, and they said 25%. The other thing that I want to mention is I had talked about the weight savings with the race wheel set. I looked up the weights of the Maxxis tires, and the Icons were quite a bit lighter than the stock tires that came on the Spur. I really love the stock tires for the Spur, but for dry cross-country race courses, I would prefer the Icons, and the tires were quite a bit lighter. So I think about half the weight savings came in the tires, not just the wheel set. And finally, the trail conditions were about the same between the 2 days, which is pretty remarkable this time of year in Florida because we can get rain that just comes out of nowhere, and that has not happened this week. It's been a very dry week. All right, now let's go over the lap times. So the first section, on the RKT9, I had a 14:44. On the Transition Spur, I had a 14:31, so 13 seconds faster on the spur. And I'll talk about why I feel like I was faster on the spur. Heart rates were a little bit higher on the spur for the second day. So I had a 167 average on the first day on the RKT9 and a 175 max. On the second day on the spur, I had a 171 average, so 4 beats higher, and then a 181 max, 6 beats higher on the max. I don't put a lot of stock into that because heart rate really fluctuates depending on the weather, how good you feel, hydration, but I pushed it as hard as I could go for both days, and I felt about the same. On the second section, on the RKT9, I had a 13:03. On the Transition Spur, I was 12 seconds faster with a 12:51. Those heart rates were a little closer. So the first day on the RKT, I had a 170 average, 181 max, and a 173 average on the spur with a 185 max. So why do I think I was faster on the spur? I'm going to mention a few things here, and by the time I upload this video, I will have already done the full review, the unveiling of the Transition Spur. So I may repeat some things in that video that's coming up that I haven't shot yet. This is kind of weird. It's kind of like Back to the Future. But anyway, I know I'm going to upload that other video before this one. So, climbing, I felt about the same on both bikes. The RKT9, the Niner CVA suspension is a really great design, one of my favorites. It's very efficient pedaling. I stayed in the saddle on the climbs, and I felt about the same on both bikes. The suspension design on the Spur is remarkably efficient. And so climbing, I felt about the same. It's the cornering where I felt like the Spur was faster. The bike is simply just more stable in the corners. I felt more confident. I felt like I could throw the bike into a corner, not caring if there was loose sand, a root, or whatever. And I think that's why it was faster. Now, also, there were obviously some descents. It's nothing like riding in the mountains, but was the Spur faster on those? It was hard to tell. I mean, you do have an extra, 30 millimeters of travel in the rear on the Spur, and so it could have been a little faster on the descents, but like I said, I think it was the corners. A couple other notes that I just thought of when I was riding is I feel like I was less likely to crash on the slacker bike, the Spur. That's pretty obvious, but if you are in a race and you have one really bad bobble or crash, it can obviously affect your time. So, if the bikes were completely equal in time, which I feel like they're pretty equal. The Spur is obviously a little bit faster on this day, but if the bikes are completely equal, I would go with the slacker bike because not only is it more fun to ride, but it's also going to be a little bit more stable and maybe less crashes. Also, the longer your event or race or ride is, the fresher you're going to be on a bike like the Spur that has more travel and slacker geometry. Now, one time trial comparison is not enough to make a final decision on the bike, so I'm going to repeat this a couple more times and see if I get the same results. I think at the end of this video, I'll give my results on the next one just real quick. And I'm going to do the next one, the Spur first, and then the RKT9 the next day. And so, like I said, I'll go over those times to let you know if they're consistent. So let's pick it up there. All right, I did 2 more days of testing 1 week later, and these are the results. So I did the Spur the first day, the RKT9 the second day. On the first section, I was 2 seconds faster on the Spur. On the second section, I was 1 second faster on the Spur. So pretty much the same times for all intents and purposes. What's the conclusion after all this? Well, I don't feel like I can confidently say that one bike is faster than the other. Yes, the Spur was a little bit faster on both sets of time trial tests. But the good thing is, it wasn't slower, and the Spur with the slacker geometry, I feel like I would be fresher at the end of a long race or event, and it's a little bit more fun to ride. I feel like I can relax a little bit more on the Spur. I can be more aggressive on the downhills. So I've got the RKT9 actually up for sale, not because I don't like the bike. It's actually one of my favorite bikes of all times, but I mix it up a lot on my YouTube channel. It's just the way I do things, and I'm going to be riding the Spur for a while. I feel like I can confidently race that bike in the upcoming cross-country race season and do just fine, especially with a really good set of race wheels. But here's what I'm going to do. If for some reason the RKT9 does not sell in a few weeks, I'm going to do these tests back to back because I've already got a new set of race wheels for the Spur, Stan's Podiums, and I'm going to put race wheels and tires on the Spur, and I'll have the Valors with the RKT9 because I'm selling the RKT9 with the Valors. Again, if the RKT9 doesn't sell, I will do these tests on the same day. So, you know, I'll just do one bike, go back, grab the other one, and see if I get the same results. So it's very interesting. That'll wrap it up for this video. Stay tuned to the channel because I'll be doing more videos with the Spur coming up. Thanks for watching.